Nobody wants a single mom with baggage. That's what my sister said, right there, at her own wedding, into the microphone, smiling. Hi, I'm Calista Vane, 34 years old, single mom, and an accountant in a small town called Charleston, South Carolina. My son Eli is 10, smart, gentle, fiercely kind, everything I ever wanted to raise in a world that's often too cruel. I've learned to keep my head down, to survive quiet rooms and cold shoulders, especially from my own family. But that day, standing in a ballroom full of polished people, hearing my sister laugh as she mocked my life in front of everyone, I finally hit the limit. What she didn't know, though, was that the man she was about to marry already knew the real me, long before he ever met her, and he had his own story to tell. I've always liked numbers. They don't lie, don't judge. People, on the other hand, a different story. That's why my tiny accounting office above a bookstore in Charleston felt like home. Just me, my calculator, and Eli's doodles taped on the filing cabinet. Mom, you almost done? Eli poked his head in, cheeks pink from soccer. He was 10, all elbows and energy, with a smile that made hard days easier. 5 minutes, I said, typing one last line. Homework? Spelling's done, but I need help with the American Revolution. I laughed. Of course you do. On the walk home, the air smelled like sea salt and blooming azaleas. Charleston was beautiful in spring, but I barely noticed anymore. My head was full of numbers and family obligations, especially the latest one, dinner at my mother's house with my sister Serena and her fiancé. My mother, Darlene, didn't ask if we could come. She commanded it. She always had a way of making us feel like guests in our own lives. Serena was the golden girl, with her glossy hair and perfect life. And now, she was marrying Julian Renner, a financial advisor with a Harvard degree and a face fit for a billboard. When Eli and I arrived, Darlene opened the door with her usual tight smile. You're late. We're on time, I replied. Inside, everything was perfectly curated. Lavender candles, lamb roast, and carefully chilled wine. Serena was perched on the couch like a queen. She barely looked at Eli. Then Julian stood and offered his hand. Nice to meet you. His eyes, hazel, warm, met mine, and something flickered. Familiarity. He crouched slightly. What grade are you in? 5th, Eli said. Best year. My volcano exploded at the science fair. You'll love it. Eli laughed. No one in that house ever made him feel seen. But Julian did. Serena's voice cut through. You're not wearing that to the wedding, right? I glanced at my blouse and slacks. It's just dinner. Darlene added. We didn't ask you to be a bridesmaid, dear. With your situation. That word, situation. Like my life was a stain on their perfection. I stayed quiet, nails pressing into my palm. Julian noticed, his jaw tight. Dinner was long, filled with wedding talk and backhanded comments. But Eli held my hand under the table. He always knew when I needed grounding. Later, as I organized RSVP cards in Darlene's study, Julian walked in with 2 coffees. You're basically running this whole wedding, he said. Someone has to. He studied me. Did you ever volunteer at Memorial Children's Hospital? I froze. Yes, a long time ago. My sister Lauren was there. You read to her, sang to her. She said you made the hospital feel safe. My breath caught. She called me Sunshine Girl. He nodded slowly. That was you. Just like that, the air changed. He wasn't just Serena's fiancé anymore. He was the boy who once watched his sister fade away and remembered the girl who made her smile. After that night in my mother's study, something shifted. Julian started showing up in small ways. A thank you text after I fixed the florist's order. A quick call to double-check the reception layout. He always made it seem casual, businesslike. But I wasn't stupid. I saw the way he lingered when we spoke. The soft edge in his voice when he asked about Eli. And most of all, I saw how Serena didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. Julian was just another accessory to her, presentable, educated, lucrative. 2 weeks before the wedding, the pressure hit a fever pitch. The dress fittings, seating charts, guest list corrections, all dumped onto me without a single please or thank you. My evenings disappeared into color-coded spreadsheets and napkin sample deliveries. And when I wasn't solving Serena's wedding meltdowns, I was helping Eli build his science project volcano. We worked at the kitchen table together, his hands covered in glue and baking soda. "You're doing too much, Mom," he said one night. I paused. "What makes you say that?" He shrugged. "You're always tired. You haven't smiled for real in a while." I smiled then, not because he was wrong, but because he saw me. My 10-year-old saw what no one else in my family cared to notice. The next day, Julian called. "Can we meet?" he asked. "Somewhere quiet. I promise it's not about place cards." We met at a coffee shop near the marina, where the scent of salt and espresso mingled in the air. He looked tired but resolute. "I need to ask you something," he said after we sat. "And I know it's going to be complicated." "Go ahead," I said, wrapping my hands around the mug. "I want you to be my maid of honor." I blinked. "That's not how it works. Serena didn't even ask me to be a bridesmaid." "I know," he said quickly. "She wouldn't. But I told her I want this. You've done everything already, and this... it feels right." I stared at him. "Julian, you're marrying my sister." He leaned in. "I thought I knew her. I thought I knew what I needed. Someone polished. Someone loud enough to drown out the grief. But then I saw you again, and it reminded me of what mattered." I shook my head, heart racing. "This isn't about me." "Yes, it is," he said softly. "Lauren loved you, and I see why." I didn't say yes, I couldn't, but I didn't say no either. That night, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on screen. "What were you thinking?" She hissed before I could even speak. "Serena is distraught. You had to make this about you, didn't you?" "I didn't ask for anything," I replied, voice even. "Julian did. You always play the victim. Just don't ruin her day." "I won't, but if she doesn't want me there, she can say so." There was a long pause. "You can't back out now. Julian's told everyone. Don't make a scene." I hung up without another word. Eli was on the couch, building a Lego space station. "Was that Grandma?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah." "She mean again?" I hesitated. "Let's just say, not very nice." He nodded. "Then don't listen. You always tell me to ignore people who are wrong." I chuckled despite myself. "Guess I better start taking my own advice." In the days leading up to the wedding, Serena avoided me completely. No texts, no calls, no passive-aggressive emails, which was almost eerie. I thought about pulling out a dozen times, but then I'd remember the look on Julian's face, or the way Lauren used to smile when Eli handed her a drawing. There were moments when I caught Julian watching me, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he already knew the answer to. There was no flirting, no touching, no inappropriate glances. Just awareness, like we were both waiting for something neither of us had the nerve to name. And beneath all of it, there was Eli. At his next soccer game, Julian showed up unexpectedly, standing on the sidelines next to me. "Didn't know you were into youth sports," I said. "I'm into seeing kids who matter being supported," he said simply. Eli scored a goal that day. He ran straight to us, beaming. And Julian knelt to give him a high five like it was the most natural thing in the world. That night, as I tucked Eli into bed, he whispered, "Is Julian going to be around more?" "Maybe," I said. "Why?" "I like him," he murmured. "He doesn't talk to me like I'm invisible." I kissed his forehead. "Me too, buddy." And just like that, something started to shift, not just in Julian or in me, but in the world around us. The day of the wedding was clear and warm, the kind of spring day Charleston was famous for: soft breeze, golden light, and the scent of jasmine in the air. Eli and I arrived early. He wore a navy suit and held my hand tightly, eyes wide with both excitement and unease. I wore a soft sky blue dress, simple, elegant, unassuming. I wasn't there to shine. I just wanted to survive. "You look awesome, Mom," Eli whispered. His words meant more than any compliment I could ever get from my family. Inside St. Andrew's Church, everything looked perfect. White roses, crystal chandeliers, every detail manicured to Serena's vision. Bridesmaids flitted around the dressing room, adjusting straps and sipping champagne. Serena stood at the center of it all in her custom gown, sparkling from head to toe, her expression sharp and unreadable. She barely looked at me. "Try not to trip when we walk down the aisle." "Good to see you too," I said, keeping my tone even. Darlene sat in the corner, already critiquing the photographer's angles. When she caught sight of me, she murmured, "That dress. Very you." I didn't flinch. I'd been called plain my entire life. It didn't sting anymore. The ceremony passed in a blur. I walked behind Serena, held her bouquet, adjusted her veil. I performed every duty with quiet grace, not for her, but for myself, for Eli, who sat in the front pew beside Julian's father, legs swinging nervously, face shining with pride every time our eyes met. For Julian, who caught my gaze from the altar and gave me the smallest nod, steady, warm. But nothing prepared me for what came next. The reception was held in a grand ballroom at the Charleston Opera House. High ceilings, soft candlelight, and champagne towers glittered under crystal lighting. It was extravagant and cold, like most things my family valued. Dinner had just been served when Serena took the microphone. "I want to thank everyone for coming today," she said sweetly, "especially my amazing bridal party, and of course my maid of honor, Calista." There was polite applause. I nodded graciously. Then her voice shifted, just a hair, but I recognized that edge. "And I really admire her," she continued, the smile tightening. "For raising a child alone, that takes courage, especially when no one's ever really loved you." The room stilled. A few people chuckled uncomfortably. "She's still on the market, folks," Serena added, laughing. "Anyone looking for secondhand goods with a bonus kid?" Laughter cut through the ballroom. Darlene laughed too, loudly. My stomach twisted. Eli's small hand found mine under the table. He was trembling. I stood up. I had to get him out of there. Out of that room. Out of that cruelty. Then a chair scraped loudly behind me. Julian stood. The room fell silent again. He walked to Serena and gently took the microphone from her hand. "I need to say something," he said, voice firm and low. Serena laughed awkwardly. "Julian, what are you—" He held up a hand. She froze. "This was supposed to be my wedding," he said, "but tonight reminded me that no amount of money, flowers, or polished veneers can hide the truth." Gasps spread across the room. He turned and looked at me. "Calista and I didn't just meet last month. We met years ago at Memorial Children's Hospital. My sister Lauren was dying. Calista was the one who sat with her, read to her, made her laugh. She was our light during the darkest time." I froze. Eli squeezed my hand harder. His eyes were wide. "She brought her son, too," Julian continued. "Little Eli, he drew stars and planets for Lauren. She kept everyone by her bed. She called him her little astronaut." The ballroom was dead silent. Julian turned back to the crowd. "So when I heard what was said here tonight, about Calista, about Eli, I knew I couldn't go through with this." Serena's jaw dropped. "You don't mean that." Julian looked at her without blinking. "I absolutely do. I'm calling off the wedding." Gasps again. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. Darlene stood up, pale as a ghost. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Julian said. "Send me the bill." Then he walked to Eli, got down on one knee. "Thank you," he said, "for being the light you are." Eli blinked, unsure, but nodded. Julian stood and turned to me. "Come with me?" I didn't move right away. Everything felt frozen, like my entire life had been leading to this one impossible moment. But then I took his hand. And together we walked out, past Serena's tears, past my mother's glare, past every person who ever made me feel less. We didn't stop until we were outside, under the Charleston stars. Julian hailed a cab. "I know a place," he said, "quiet, by the water." The restaurant he took us to was a little seafood shack overlooking the harbor. Wooden deck, fairy lights, the sound of waves crashing nearby. For the first time all day, I could breathe. We didn't say much during the meal. Eli colored on a napkin. Julian stared out at the water. Finally, he spoke. I'm sorry. For what? I asked. For the speech, the mess, everything. You don't apologize for telling the truth, I said. He nodded. After Lauren died, I lost myself. Serena was noise. I thought that's what I needed. But it wasn't, I said. No, he whispered. It wasn't. His phone buzzed on the table. Serena's name lit up the screen. He silenced it. She's going to keep calling, I said quietly. She'll hear from my lawyer, he said. Eli looked up then. Julian? Yeah, buddy? Remember those drawings, the stars I made for the lady in the hospital? Julian smiled. That was my sister. She loved them. She said I was funny, Eli said. You were her hero, Julian replied. The waves rolled in, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. The next morning, we visited Lauren's grave. The cemetery was quiet, tucked between tall pines and overlooking the bay. Julian walked slowly, white daisies in one hand and a small stone in the other, painted with a yellow sun and stars, edges worn with time. Eli walked beside him, hands in his coat pockets. This was hers? He asked, eyeing the stone. Julian nodded. She kept it by her bed. We reached the marker. Simple, clean, engraved with beloved. Julian knelt and placed the flowers, then gently set the stone beside them. She always said your drawings made her feel brave. Eli stared. I didn't think she'd remember me. She never forgot you. I stood behind them, heart heavy but soft. It didn't feel like grief. It felt like closure. Julian stood and reached for my hand. I let him take it. A year later, my life had changed in ways I never thought possible. I opened a small financial office downtown, Vane Financial Services. The name had been Julian's idea. You built this, he said. Let them know it. The space was warm, honest, not fancy, but real. On the wall behind my desk hung Eli's latest drawing, a rocket ship blasting through a field of stars. Business was steady, word spread. People came not just for advice, but for someone who listened. At home, Eli thrived. He was stronger now, more sure of himself. He'd become the kind of kid who stood up for others, not just himself. And Julian? He never missed a single game, or dinner, or bedtime story. We weren't married, not yet. But we were a family. As for Serena and my mother, Darlene, they faded into the background. Serena's career never recovered from the wedding scandal. People talked, jobs stopped calling. She moved away quietly, without a word. My mother tried to reach out. Voicemails, awkward apology cards, but I didn't answer. I had nothing cruel to say. I just had nothing left for them. Some endings don't need revenge. Just silence. It was Christmas Eve when Julian brought out the box. Eli was asleep on the couch, the glow of tree lights dancing on his face. Julian and I sat by the fire, cocoa in hand. This belonged to Lauren, he said, opening the lid. Inside sat a vintage emerald ring. She told me to give it to someone who reminded me what love means. That's you. Tears rose before I could speak. Calista, he said, will you marry me? I looked at the ring, at the boy asleep under the tree, at the man who saw me before I saw myself. Yes, I whispered. Outside, snow began to fall, light, gentle, like peace finally finding a place to land. There's something funny about healing. You don't notice it at first. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or fireworks. It's quieter than that, like a door you'd forgotten was ever locked suddenly swinging open. For years, I thought survival was the best I could hope for. I thought if I kept my head down, stayed useful, stayed silent, maybe I'd earn some scrap of grace. I thought love had to be earned through self-sacrifice, but I was wrong. Love, the kind that heals, the kind that lasts, is never about proving you're worthy. It's about being seen, exactly as you are, and still being chosen. When Serena mocked me at her wedding, I could have let it define me. I could have walked away, once again absorbing the cruelty my family had handed me for years. But I didn't, because that moment, public, humiliating, and awful, became something else. A mirror, a line in the sand. And on the other side of that line stood Julian, choosing not perfection, but truth. And standing beside us was Eli, my son, my anchor, my reason. I don't know what the future holds. I don't expect life to be easy just because I finally stepped into the light. But I do know this. I have a home now, not just the roof over our heads, but the space where we laugh, fight fair, and let each other be human. I have work that matters, a son who shines, a man who never asked me to shrink myself. Serena once called me second-hand. But second-hand means lived in, proven, resilient, and I'll take that any day over being shiny and hollow. To anyone listening, if you've ever been told you weren't enough, weren't wanted, weren't worthy, I'm here to say that was never the truth. You were always more than they saw. You were always worth choosing. I see you, and I hope one day you see yourself too.